Good evening. Welcome to this evening's City Council meeting. Today is November 14th, 2023, and the meeting is hereby called to order. Members of the public may attend the City Council meeting in person or may watch and listen remotely by viewing the meeting on Channel 8, WCTV, and the city's website at www.wayzata.org/WCTV. Public comment during the public forum and/or public hearing portions of the meeting may be provided in person at the meeting in advance or by logging into the Zoom call and raising your hand during the public hearing. When your name is called in the meeting, you will be seen and heard in our council chambers and the cable channel. You will be asked to unmute, and then you may begin your comment. All public comments must include your full name and address. Second item on the agenda this evening is the Pledge of Allegiance. I would ask everyone to please stand and follow along. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda for this evening is the roll call. Please let the record reflect that all members of the council are present this evening. Also, I'd like to mention that the council did participate in a workshop where we discussed the status of the 2024 general fund budget and tax levy. The council also held a closed meeting of the Wayzata City Council at 5 p.m. to evaluate the annual performance of the Wayzata City Manager, Jeffrey Dahl. This meeting was closed pursuant to Minnesota statutes, section 13D.05, subdivision 3A, which provides an exception to the open meeting law when the council evaluates the performance of an individual who is subject to its authority. As is required by the open meeting law, at this, our next meeting, the City Council will now summarize its conclusions from that performance evaluation. Those conclusions are as follows. Mr. Dahl is a very well-respected member of our city staff. He is well respected by his staff, by business owners, and by residents, and certainly by the council. He does an excellent job managing his staff and addressing the many and diverse functions inherent in his role as city manager. He conducts regular, productive staff meetings where goals are set and monitored. He handles the budget well, keeps the council well informed on important decisions, and stays focused on priority goals. We have been repeatedly advised that Mr. Dahl listens carefully to the concerns of our constituents, including applicants, developers, business owners, and residents. Mr. Dahl handles council and other meetings efficiently and respectfully. Mr. Dahl works very long and hard hours, yet remains attentive, cheerful, and energetic. One of our traits that, as he nods up, one of the traits that we all have come to really appreciate about you. Overall, the council continues to be very pleased with his work. There were only one or two very minor areas for possible improvement, and they are certainly more along the lines of professional development and continuing to expand his communication and outreach to the community. And we set some professional development goals related to that for 2024, along with increasing contributions of our liquor fund operations for contribution back to the city, an increase there, and continuing his good work with his informal board of advisors that you put together last year. And you'll be continuing that for this year. So again, you know, the council is very pleased for your excellent work. We appreciate your commitment to the city, to supporting us and to supporting staff. And we look forward to a very productive 2024. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a privilege to serve each and every one of you in our community. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Very good. So The next item for this evening is for us to approve the agenda. Would anyone care to make a motion to approve the agenda, or are there any changes that we need to make before we proceed? No? Someone make a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. In a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes. Next item is the public forum. As a reminder for those members of the public in attendance this evening who are interested in speaking, we ask that you please state your name, address, indicate if you are representing a group, and we ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. If the item you wish to speak about is something that is on the agenda, for those that are in person, we ask that you please fill out a form at the table and hand it to staff. For those that are watching via Zoom, please send a note via chat to staff and let them know what agenda item you wish to speak about. We also require that your camera is turned on when you speak. We have one item so far this evening for our public forum, and that is a legislative update from Senator Kelly Morrison. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We invited Senator Morrison not only to give an update, but just, I don't know last year that we ever did an official introduction as the boundaries changed in our district. So it kind of serves as an official introduction to the city of Wayzata, at least at a council meeting. So I'd welcome Senator Morrison to come up and say a few words.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would have to second, third, and fourth the praise for the city manager. Really a pleasure to work with. You all should know that from the legislative standpoint. Well, good evening, and thank you for having me tonight. I'm Kelly Morrison, and I'm honored to represent the new District 45 in the Minnesota Senate, which includes 15 communities in the Lake Minnetonka area, including Wayzata. If it's okay, I'd like to just touch on some of the highlights of this past session, particularly some of what I've been working on. And then, of course, I'd love to hear from all of you about Wayzata's priorities. I serve, for your information, so you know, I serve on 4 committees in the Senate: Health and Human Services, Transportation, Environment, Climate, and Legacy, and State and Local Government and Veterans. And I serve as an Assistant Majority Leader. I'm also serving on the newly formed Task Force on Aging, the Task Force on Psychedelic Medicine, the Rare Disease Advisory Council, and the Opioid Epidemic Response Advisory Council. Certainly, one of my priorities as the only OBGYN in the Minnesota legislature was to protect reproductive health care in Minnesota, and that is the first bill that was passed into law. That early passage set the tone for the session and was followed by multiple standalone bills, which is kind of unusual in the legislature these days, and I kind of prefer it because we can debate each bill individually. My priorities have been a combination of big picture and local needs. When I think about the big challenges that we face as a state, I tend to put them into 3 big buckets: workforce, disparities, and water. We have workforce shortages in just about every sector of the economy in Minnesota, and we have the reality of an aging demographic. So we need to be really mindful of crafting policies that will encourage people to stay in Minnesota and also entice people to move here. We have some of the worst racial disparities in the country, and that group is disproportionately young. We have to change that trajectory. It is the moral thing to do, and it is the economically wise thing to do. And finally, water. Here we are in Minnesota, sitting on a wealth of fresh water. And in the era of accelerating climate change and increasing water scarcity, I really think it's our obligation to be good stewards of our water. These are big, complex challenges that hit on a lot of policy issues, but they're front of mind for me when I approach my work at the legislature. This past session, I carried more than 100 bills, and more than 60 of them became law. And many fit into the categories that I just described. Some that I'm particularly proud of are a bill to create a plan to ensure that Minnesota has adequate clean water for the next 50 years. I also authored the Reproductive Freedom Defense Act, which protects patients and providers from restrictive reproductive health laws in other states. I passed a ban on the non-essential use of PFAS, which is known as a forever chemical because it doesn't degrade in nature. I passed a bill to get naloxone in our schools to ensure that no one dies of an opioid overdose on school grounds. And the Prescription Drug Affordability Board will help people access the medicine they need and decrease the burden of high-cost drugs on our system. In terms of local needs, of course, you all know we passed the construction sales tax exemption. And also relevant locally, we passed my boater education bill, which will hopefully make our lakes safer and protect them from erosion and the spread of aquatic invasive species. I was also able to secure funding for the Minnesota Aquatic Invasive Species Research Center, or MASERC, so that it can continue to do its nation-leading work on AIS research, prevention, and treatment. And we passed a significant increase in school funding, including more than $8.6 million for Wayzata schools and almost $2 million for Orono. Part of the final package also included additional public safety funding for every community in our Senate district, including almost $200,000 for Wayzata. So with that, I think I'll stop. I did hear that you all were able to present Wayzata's bonding request on the House tour today, which is fantastic, and I'm pushing hard to get us a spot on the January Senate tour, Capital Investment Tour. But I'd love to hear from you all about what Wayzata's priorities are, and of course, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Before we kick it off to the senator, or to the senator, oh, you just got a promotion, Jeff.
I think I'll stick with this gig.
With the city manager, yes. Before I kick it over to the city manager to talk about our priorities, questions of council for Senator Morrison?
I actually have one.
Kathy?
Thank you for coming, and question as you kind of look at water, not specific just for the Wayzata area, but boundary waters. And please do what you can to protect that amazing resource that we have in the state of Minnesota. So I'm more just being a cheerleader. Do you have anything that's on the docket for that, or?
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. That is front of mind, and there was more bad news today about the boundary waters, and that Birch Lake, which is on the doorstep, was added to the list of impaired waters with elevated sulfate levels. I am carrying a bill in the Senate that would ban hard rock mining, in other words, copper sulfide mining in the watershed of the boundary waters. It's currently, all mining is banned in the boundary waters, but the watershed is, of course, right next to and flows into the boundary waters. And so this bill would ban it on state lands. There is an accompanying bill in the House, hoping very much that we will get a hearing for that bill this year. As you know, the question of whether or not we're going to take this risk of embarking on copper sulfide mining in our state is front of mind for many. I'm hoping that regardless of how people feel about other projects, we can all agree that the boundary waters deserve permanent protection. So I am advocating for that in the Senate, yeah.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes.
What are the things you are doing to draw people to Minnesota and the things to try and keep people here?
That's a great question, and I think that one of the challenges that we have is having policy debates with that in mind. And I think people will probably come to different conclusions. But for example, I think that the paid family and medical leave, some people will think that that may drive businesses away. Others think that that will help encourage people to come to Minnesota to want to live and work and raise a family here. I do think that the fact that we have welcoming laws around reproductive health care and our LGBT neighbors is a welcome sign for a lot of people and families to come move here. And I think we have to be mindful of our tax policy. I think we need balance in Minnesota. We know that we're a high tax state. I'm personally of the mind that we should not be the highest tax state. We want to make sure that we are encouraging businesses to want to grow and develop here. But we also want to continue to have the high quality of life that many Minnesotans enjoy.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course.
Wonderful, thank you. Jeff, do you want to talk a little bit about some of our legislative priorities for the coming year?
Happy to, Madam Mayor. And we're, just as an update, we do plan to have a workshop to discuss our legislative priorities, kind of reaffirm those and present them to Senator Morrison and Representative Acomb. But generally speaking, similar to last year, our focus has been on getting more resources from the state for some of our amenities and operations of our park system, primarily Panaway. And it all gets back to, we're trying to enhance the lake and everything around the lake with the knowledge that 90% or more of the people that are utilizing the amenities are not even from the community. So what's that balance of getting more resources from the state, both for capital and operational needs, knowing that we don't get any money through fiscal disparities and we don't get through LGA. So really, I hate to use the phrase ATM to St. Paul, but, we think it's a fair return, whether it's bonding, which Senator Morrison has helped us on throughout the past couple of years and will be at it again this year, as well as other mechanisms to keep some of the revenue in Wayzata so we can help pay for some of the service that we're providing all the visitors, so it's not solely on the taxpayers that have property here. And the most, the biggest way we could do that is through some type of local option sales tax, which we'll have those conversations again this year. Aside from that, Mayor, we also are continuing to follow and work on the SRO issue in the legislature, as well as increasing fees for motor vehicle departments so we can keep up with our costs and some of those kind of lighter, non-sexy legislative priorities.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, it's a lot for a small town of 4,500 people, but we have really appreciated the representation you have given us on your short tenure, new district, but it really is appreciated. We've met several times. You put a number of items forward for us, and that partnership and that support means a great deal, not just to us and the work that we do, but to staff and the community as a whole. Some of the initiatives you're working on, I'm looking forward to learning more about when we get together. I do have some questions, but that could go on for for quite some time, and I won't hold you up at this hour of the night. But really thank you for your hard work, for your service, certainly, and for providing an update to all of us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. And of course, all the mayor and council members, you're always welcome to reach out if you have individual questions for me. And that goes to the citizens of Wayzata as well. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you, Senator Morrison.
Thank you.
All right, we are still in the public forum. Staff, do we have any members on Zoom or any cards?
Madam Mayor, we do not.
Okay, then we will move on to new agenda items. Council, does anyone have any new agenda items that they would like to discuss or bring up at a future meeting? No? All right, then I will go through the consent agenda, and I will read through those here for everyone. Following items are for approval of the City Council on the consent agenda: approval of the City Council regular meeting minutes of October 10, 2023, City Council regular meeting and workshop meeting minutes of October 24, and special meeting minutes of November 2, 2023. We have approval of the check register, approval of municipal licenses, receipt of the building activity report, receipt of the police activity report, receipt of third quarter 2023 financial report, approval of Healthy Tree Canopy Grant Agreement with Hennepin County, authorization to solicit bids for the Marina Dredging Project, approval of the 2024 liability insurance coverage waiver form, adoption of Resolution 63-2023, authorizing submittal of the 2023 Active Living Technical Assistance Program grant for a new Wayzata event in Panaway, approval of addendum of recording secretary service agreement with Time Saver Off-Site Secretarial, Inc., extending the agreement to December 31, 2024. Approval of professional services agreement with Civitas, Inc. for ongoing support with railroad crossing improvements at Berry and Broadway Avenues. And lastly, approval of first reading of ordinance 833, allowing railroad crossing improvements adjacent to Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad corridor along Wayzata Bay of Lake Minnetonka. Members of the council, do any of you have any questions or care to pull one of the items for further discussion? Yes, Councilmember Pleckish.
Yes, Madam Mayor and Council, I don't necessarily want to pull this item, but I'd like to at least have a little bit of information given about it, and that's item 7L. It concerns the services agreement with Civitas. I don't want to debate this necessarily, but it's a $45,000 addition to the budget we didn't have in there before, and I didn't want this thing to just slide in and not make some comment about it. My understanding is that this will be paid for by TIF district money, that if we didn't spend it on this, we would eventually lose that money if we didn't have something to spend it on. But I wanted to at least put that in the record that this was discussed to some degree. So if you may, maybe have the city manager comment on it?
Absolutely. City Manager, would you care to provide some additional information on that item?
Happy to. I think Councilmember Pleckish said it well. It is funded by TIF District 5. This is part of the railroad crossing enhancements that'll provide accessibility and just overall better public safety at Broadway and Berry Avenues. It's been a journey working with to say the least, with the different entities involved. Ultimately, it's heading in a really beneficial direction for the city. It's just costing a little bit more with surveying and entitlements and getting all the necessary information, but it will be definitely beneficial in the long term for the community.
Wonderful, thank you. Any other questions? No? All right, would someone care then to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, in a second.
Second?
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That motion passes. Yeah, thank you for the work on the railroad safety crossing. That was a big initiative, and certainly rose very high on the list of why we were doing Panaway. I mean, it's a big component and a lot of moving pieces. So thank you to everyone, including our city attorney. A lot of hoops to jump through, and we're in the final stretch, so.
We're almost there, and kudos, I agree, our city attorney's been instrumental, so I appreciate him.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, we will move on to new business, and under new business this evening, our first item is to consider adoption of Resolution 64-2023, approving a rear yard setback and impervious surface variances at 223 Gleason Lake Road. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Assistant Planner Coral is going to walk us through this presentation.
Wonderful, good evening, Ms. Quarles.
Good evening. Just a quick note to start. I'm a little congested today, so if I spin away once or twice, it's not
Spin
because
away
I
as
still
much
am
as you need
deeply
to.
dedicated to this meeting in this effort. Today we'll be
understand.
talking about development application at 223 Gleason Lake Road for an impervious surface variance and a rear yard setback variance. The owners are John Pfluger and Krista Johnson, and the applicant's representative is their architect, Thomas Everson. The project is located up by Gleason Lake in the north part of town and is located just sort of diagonally along Gleason Lake. There's a couple of other addresses around it that I've got up here for reference. We may talk about 215 Gleason Lake a little bit because they submitted a public comment. The surrounding neighborhood is pretty homogeneous. It's mostly that R1 low density and that 1 acre single family. You can see already from these images that this property is a little bit of an oddball. Most of the 1 acre single families are larger than this one. This is definitely smaller and tucked in among all these other ones. And then that red line on one and that blue line on the other, Minnetonka is on the other side of that. So we don't have any land use designations for them. The lot today is about 4/10 of an acre, which is under the minimum lot size for R1, which is about 40,000 square feet. The home that was there today was built in 1914 and has a footprint of about 1,1700 square feet. Right now, they've got a 1-stall garage. Right now, that current home doesn't conform to front or rear setbacks, and one of the things I wanted to note on this slide is that we've sort of turned the entire site plan a little bit, and again, that's because the whole property sits diagonal relative to north and south, so for the purposes of easy cropping, we flipped everything a little bit. And then just wanted to note on that north side, you can see that there's a shared driveway. That's how the owners at the property behind this one get to their property. There's also a public path along Gleason Lake Road that actually does run onto this property. And those are just to note because we're going to be talking about impervious surface, and those are two items that definitely burden that total. And then one other thing to note is that I think that the reason this property is smaller than the other ones is because it was platted from a larger estate over the years. So there's a relationship between some of the buildings in this neighborhood for that reason as well. That image is up there, that blue box, is to show you what the actual buildable area of this lot is if you started over. So that includes that front and rear and side setbacks. So you can see how the home is really oriented perpendicular to what that would normally look like if we had started from scratch and not in 1914. This is just some background imagery. The first image is the south side of the home. That's actually from the Historical Society's website. And then the second image is just, if you don't know what this house looks like, that makes sense. If you look at it from the road, you just see the fence and a lot of greenery. So the proposal is to take that one stall garage we were talking about and expand it from 1 to 2 stalls with some additional storage space. And then to create an owner suite and screened porch on another side of the house and add some stormwater mitigation to account for the extra hardcover that we're getting as a result of the application. So we're looking at an impervious surface variance, which brings our hardcover from 27.5% to about 32%. Note that the limit in this district is actually 25%. And then a rear yard setback variance to account for that garage. So what that ends up looking like is in yellow on the left side of the image, you can see a part labeled addition. That's the new stall for the garage, and then some additional storage space that sort of ends up fitting within that sort of wedge between the addition and the existing house. That red is how the driveway is going to change shape a little bit to account for that new drive up to the garage. On the bottom side of the image, you can see that other addition and new deck. Note that those are both within the setbacks. They just are going to impose on that hardcover total. And then some additional floor plan info on the side there for future reference as we're talking about this later. This is an elevation from the north side, just to give you an idea of what that garage looks like. It's tucked down pretty low. There's not anything proposed to be built on top of the garage. It's really just that one level garage down there with that additional storage space. So as I mentioned, that impervious surface variance is coming along because one, the property's already over on hardcover, and two, this does represent an increase. That increase is driven by the increase in the area of the home generally. The driveway size is not changing all that much. They're editing a turnaround a little bit, so that stays kind of the same in total, but that house does drive quite a bit of that. And then to account for that impervious surface overage, they're adding stormwater management in the form of drain tile, so that'll go in the backyard and redirect water to make sure that it doesn't go onto other properties. Just a quick note that this is also in the Shoreland Overlay District, which has a limit of 25%. Doesn't end up mattering a whole lot in this case because the limit in that district and in this zoning district are the same. That usually comes into play a lot more in our smaller zoning districts. Just to note that difference that I mentioned in the driveway there, you can see that they're taking away that turnaround in that first image. That's the current condition. And then in the second image, sort of bringing that in to lead up to the garage. The rear yard setback variance, I definitely have to correct myself a lot and not say that it's the side yard, because this house really doesn't face the street, but this is the rear yard. There's a 50-foot setback requirement in this district, and they're asking to go down to about 22 feet. I will note that currently they're actually pretty close to that 50-foot setback, so this is a pretty big encroachment. But as I mentioned, because this house is perpendicular, it's a little tougher to think about what is rear and side in a practical sense. That addition I mentioned earlier is angled in part to sort of reduce that setback request, but it's angled to reduce that setback request because there's storage included. If it was just that single car addition, it wouldn't make much of a difference, but this is sort of the most efficient way to add some storage while not necessarily getting any closer to that rear line. The engineering department checked over the stormwater management plan. They found it adequate. As always, they want to note that there's always a facilities maintenance agreement required and tree preservation plan. There is not a plan currently to remove any trees, but it is always important to preserve what we have and make sure that there aren't construction impacts. And then, as always, we always want an as-built survey to make sure that everything's the way that we approved it, if it is approved. We did our standard notification for this one, as did the applicant. I did get one verbal positive public comment over the phone from a neighbor up the road. We did get one negative written public comment, which is included in your packet, from that neighbor at 215 Gleason Lake, which is just to the southeast of the to the south of the property. They were mostly concerned about the aesthetic and design of the addition, as well as noise impacts that they were concerned about, and then their location as the immediate neighbor. The Planning Commission checked out this application on October 2nd. They talked a lot about how this lot is pretty undersized for that R1 zoning district. You know, the impacts of that shared driveway and that public path that are both on this lot. The perpendicular items that we were talking about earlier. A lot of existing screening from adjacent properties is already on or near the lot in terms of that greenery and that tree line. The Planning Commission was definitely in favor of preserving that existing historic home and finding ways to do that. And then we discussed both those positive and those negative public comments. We also had one public commenter come to the meeting, and they were pretty neutral on the idea. They just wanted to make sure the owner you know, knew who they were and knew that they wanted to be included in the process as the northern neighbor. So at the end of the day, the Planning Commission voted 5-0 to recommend approval. And just as a note, our standard conditions always include those notes from engineering about stormwater and other items. So the motion in front of you is to adopt Resolution 64, 2023, approving rear yard setback and impervious surface variances at 223 Gleason Lake Road. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Quarles. Council, questions for staff?
I just have one, Mayor, please.
Councilmember Iverson?
1 minute so I could just find that page. I believe it has to do, it's on page 144. It talks about the proposed stormwater management plan provides adequate volume control for 1 inch of rain. That seems a little low to me, since we're seeming to have significant rainfalls. 1 inch seems low. Is there a reason for that particular number?
Sure, I can check in with engineering on why it's that number. I know that 1 inch of rainfall across the entire property is the number that we've been using for everybody when it comes to the volume that they need to provide control for due to the excess impervious surface, but I can certainly check in to see if that continues to be best practice.
I thank you for doing that. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Iverson. Other questions? No? Can you clarify the comment about the noise, the concerns from the neighbor during construction? Is that the concern?
As I understood it, it was concerns about the noise from, I believe, entertaining on their they have an existing deck back there, and they're going to continue to have a deck back there.
Okay,
We didn't have a ton of dialogue about that particular point with that commenter.
okay. Is the deck moving closer?
Not any closer. It's moving to the side a little bit to account for that new addition on that side.
And does that deck contribute to the hardcover percentage?
I do not believe that it does. When we have a deck that has, you know, regular grass underneath it, we don't, you know, count it as keeping rainwater from hitting the ground.
So it just has footings. It's not a patio.
As I understand it, yes.
So, okay. Very good. Thank you. So that's not up for consideration this evening. The architectural, the other concerns with regard to the aesthetic and the architectural design, that's not for our consideration this evening either. We're just looking at the hardcover and the setback.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anything else from council before we move on to? No? All right, anybody care to begin with their thoughts on the project? No? Councilmember McDonald.
Be happy to kick things off. This, I think the Planning Commission made a similar comment, but this feels really reminiscent of a variance request we just had with another home that was built in 1914. And similarly to the findings of that application to this application, I agree with the Planning Commission and think that saving one of our older homes is really great. So I support this, and I'm sympathetic to the issues of it being such a small-ish lot in such a big district. So, yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. Councilmember Plekish?
Madam Mayor, I actually have some concerns about this. It's a really odd situation because everything about this property is out of conformance. The lot would never have been allowed, I think, in current council or planning commission to be that small, and the house wouldn't have been allowed to be positioned the way that it was, and the impervious surface that's already there wouldn't have been allowed. So I mean, I'm having a little bit of a hard time saying that there's enough here for me to approve it. So yeah, I just don't see it.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Iverson?
I'm probably a mix between the two. Thank you for saving the old house. But I do continue to ask myself why, when we understand what the boundaries are, continue to ask for variances to continue to expand properties and make them larger. Going from a 50-foot setback to a 24 that's big. That's a large ask. So I'm not sure yet where I sit on this application.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Parkhill?
I'm glad that they're trying to save a house from 1914, and it's hard to work with these old houses, and I would say that it is our responsibility to try and save some of these old houses, and it's unfortunate this lot is awkward, but I have no problem with their requests.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I too am very thankful, having lived in a house that was from the 1930s and the special characteristics of them, and you just can't capture that that type of character in new construction. You know, one of our values here at Wayzata that we've been trying to impart is how do we become a more sustainable community and avoid things from going into landfills, and this is a house that could get raised and all of that into a landfill, never to, you know, to be used again. And instead, we have a homeowner who is looking to improve upon and add to and continue to make this their home. Some of our lots in Wayzata are difficult to work with, and our zoning has changed. The lot size doesn't necessarily change with it. And so where the house was placed in 1914 doesn't really work with our expectations of today. I do think that that is a practical difficulty. I think the ask in and of itself, quite frankly, that is leading to the hardcover variance request and the setback variance request is certainly reasonable given working with where the house currently sits. And so I appreciate, you know, working with that. We're asking for a one-car garage and a paver driveway to help mitigate some of that runoff to the extent that we can. So with that, I think I'm not terribly apt to look favorably upon requests for variances, but this is very much a reasonable request for me, and given the practical difficulties that have been expressed, I would be in support of this application as well. All right. City Manager, do we have anybody who is on Zoom or?
We do not, Madam Mayor.
Then, yes,
I have
Councilmember Iverson.
a question for staff, please.
Yes, of course.
That might help me make a decision.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Valerie, you had mentioned that in the garage, that there is some storage also included in that. Do you know what the square footage of the storage is and what it's contributing to the setback?
I am pulling it up real quick. Probably slide 7, Aurora, or somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm almost there, hang on. So I can tell you what the garage is expanding from and to on slide 7. Currently, the garage is about 321 square feet, and they're expanding that to 834 square feet. That's standard size of a two-car garage. I think is somewhere in the neighborhood of maybe, I'd have to look it up really quick, 500 square feet or thereabouts. So probably another 200 or 300 square feet of storage included in there.
Can you correct me if I'm wrong? I thought in years past that we had a minimum or maximum requirement allowed for two-car garages of like 750 feet.
We do have that 750 square foot limit. That's specifically within the R3 and R3A districts.
Okay.
So in our tighter neighborhoods, yes, we do restrict you to
Okay.
a car garage and 750.
Okay, okay, thank you for that clarification.
And this is which district again?
R1.
R1, and its minimum lot size would be an acre?
A little under 40,000 square feet.
And this is how many square feet?
0.4 acres, so about 18,000 square feet.
So considerably less than the minimum that it's zoned for.
Yes, under half.
Yeah, so can add that to my findings as well as to part of the difficulty in making, if they were within the 1 acre, we wouldn't even be here, would we? Yeah, okay. All right, thank you. Any other questions, staff? All right. So I would also like to just thank the Planning Commission for their work on this. As usual, they were very thorough. But before us, based on the work that they did, we have a motion to consider adoption of Resolution 64-2023, approving a rear yard setback and impervious surface variance at 223 Gleason Lake Road. Would someone care to make that motion?
I'll make that motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember McDonald. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion's been first and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Thank
go
you.
ahead, Councilmember.
So based off of hearing the information in regards to the garage, and what your ask is in regards to what we have in other neighborhoods, I do find that your ask is reasonable, so we'll move forward requesting approval for this.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember Iverson. Any other discussion? No? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. Thank you very much. We'll move on to our next item under new business, and that is item 8B. And that's to consider adoption of Resolution 61-2023, establishing the payback of an interfund loan for advance of certain costs in connection with tax increment financing, District Number 6. City Manager.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Deputy City Manager Yeager is going to take this item.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and council members. This is kind of a complex finance item, so I'm going to do my best to make it as clear as possible. So I'm going to give you some background on what led to this item. Back in 2020, the city embarked on a project to create a public parking lot at Lakenberry. that was eligible for TIF dollars to be paid for with TIF 6. But because that's a relatively new TIF district, there wasn't, say, cash in the bank to pay for that. So instead of issuing debt to construct that parking lot, the city went the route of establishing an interfund loan, which basically says over time, as that TIF districts earns money, it will pay back whatever account at the city established the loan with it. So at that time, our recommendation was to establish that interfund loan with the general fund, as that had basically enough cash in the bank to fully support the construction costs for that project. In 2021, that interfund loan, as construction was completed, reached its max obligation of just under $1.7 million between TIF District 6 and the general fund. And then in 2022, that TIF district made its first payment back on that interfund loan. So that's just a little bit about their trajectory up to this year. The reason we're requesting a change to the structure of this interfund loan is really twofold. One, this interfund loan makes it difficult for the general fund to meet its own reserve targets because this interfund loan is viewed as an outstanding obligation. So it makes it difficult for us to meet our own policy. And then two, it limits the ability to have excess reserves. As noted in the staff report, say if we didn't have this interfund loan present, the general fund would have had over $900,000 worth of excess at the end of the 2022 audit. So it's a big liability that the general fund is carrying. So what we're proposing to do with this resolution is to just change the structure of the interfund loan. Instead of it being structured TIF District 6 to the general fund, it would switch to being split 50-50 to the water and sewer funds. And the reason is that it limits that liability on the general fund, and the water and sewer funds have enough cash just to maintain their own reserve fund balances, working capital, all of that. A couple other notes that would stay the same is that that interfund loan would be paid back last after all other TIF 6 obligations are met, and it's currently projected to be paid back fully by 2047, though my guess is it would likely be much sooner. So if you're interested in the breakdown of what that looks like, that looks kind of crazy. This is also included in the resolution itself, but it generally shows that if this resolution is approved, that it would switch from about $1.6 million worth of this interfund loan being held at the general fund being split equally between water and sewer. I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but generally we're looking for adoption of Resolution 61, 2023, authorizing that change in the structure of the loan.
Fantastic. Thank you, Ms. Yeager. Questions of staff?
I have one.
Yes, Councilmember
I
Parker.
noticed the interest rate was 4%. Has that changed given the rise in the interest rates, or is that a recent rate?
That's a great question, Councilmember Parkhill. That rate has been established in our interfund loan, and I don't know exactly fully, but our interfund loan was set up originally with the help of Ellers, and so I think there are some limits in state statute on how much interest you can have. I don't know for sure, but this would not change from when the interfund loan was originally approved back in 2020. So it's proposing to keep that interest rate the same.
Okay, so the interest rate was fixed back then.
Right, and again, it's interest that we're basically charging ourselves. It's not interest we're getting from a bank, but it's just saying that, because water and sewer, or before that, the general fund is holding this liability, that the TIF district is gonna pay back interest for us holding it.
I was just wondering if there was extra money in the TIF district, it wouldn't be a bad way to get it into our general fund.
Yeah, I can definitely look into that for a future revision if that's possible, but my gut tells me, based on working with Ellers before, that I think they may have set it at what's allowed, but I can definitely look into that in the future.
Thanks.
Any slight percentage increase might get eaten up by hiring Ellers. They're phenomenal. But, I think it'd have to be a big percentage. That's a really great question, though. But that is the great thing about lending ourselves money. We also pay ourselves back interest, so that's pretty neat. All right, any other questions? This isn't a topic we've discussed with Ms. Yeager, with staff, amongst the council, had it explained to us multiple times, because you're right, it is complicated. But it's just basically the same amounts of money, they're just getting placed in different areas, and then we're regulated based on where the money is and how it can be used and how we classify it. So it's more kind of the technical aspects of it as opposed to, you know, owing less or owing more or anything else. That doesn't change. The dollar commitment doesn't change whatsoever.
Absolutely, you're correct, Madam Mayor. This just changed where it's represented on our books, but the loan itself, the interfund loan stays the same.
Okay. Well said. All right. Well, then would someone make a motion to adopt Resolution 61-2023, establishing the payback of an interfund loan for advance of certain costs in connection with tax increment financing district number 6?
So moved.
Second?
The motion's been first and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, Ms. Yeager, for bringing that to our attention, which leads us right into our next topic, which is what we have been trying to get to, which is the discussion of transfers of our excess reserve funds.
So, Madam Mayor, we're going to have another round of Deputy City Manager Yeager for this one, too.
All right,
Phenomenal.
more good news. So based on the action that you just took and changing the structure of our interphone loan, as I had mentioned in the previous presentation, because we had that outstanding liability in the general fund, it basically made it so we didn't have any excess available, which has been our policy. As there's excess, it's reviewed each year after our audit and transferred out to capital project funds. So with the change in the structure of the interfund loan, knowing that we had over $900,000 available, we thought it was prudent to look at uses of some of that now and then reevaluating that again after the 2023 audit has been completed. So again, while there is $900,000 currently available, we're recommending that we only consider transferring at this time $500,000, and that's to be absolutely sure that we maintain a buffer of keeping that 40% fund balance reserve in the general fund in preparation for next year. And then, like I said, in not too long, in the spring after our audit, we'll be back having this discussion again. So this was previously brought up at a workshop. At that time, there was discussion amongst the council as we reviewed the capital improvement plan, where should some of these resources be used? And as outlined in the attached resolution, that $500,000 would go to the following places. $300,000 total to the Facilities and Infrastructure Fund, $250,000 for other infrastructure improvements, $50,000 specifically to pay for the cannabis business feasibility study project that will happen next year. The 409 Equipment Fund, $150,000 going there. And then, based on council input, establishing a new public art fund and putting $50,000 into this new public art fund, kind of to establish what, based on the strategic plan, provide basically some seed money to future public art projects, whatever needs to happen as we work through kind of those council priorities. So those exact amounts are outlined in the resolution. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Wonderful, thank you. One quick question that I have is, when will we know the remaining balance that we have available for additional transfers?
That's a great question, Madam Mayor. It's anytime after the audit is completed, so that's typically late May, early June.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. Other questions? Yes,
I've got a question, Madam Mayor.
Councilmember Plekish, please go ahead.
I would be curious to get an explanation of what this cannabis business feasibility study is. What is that? Why are we paying $50,000 to do something I don't think we should be promoting in the first place?
Well, before we get to that, was that one of the meetings that you were absent? I don't remember, yes, at the workshop. It is. But keep in mind, as a council overall, we decided in our strategic planning that we would be pursuing, and actually the state decided. Yeah. So I know you don't like it, and you've mentioned that every time cannabis comes up, but the
Take advantage of every opportunity.
absolutely, and the general will of the council is that we will pursue it in some form or fashion, but we want to do so with the assistance of whatever means we need to study what that looks like, how we do that, if we do it, in what capacity. So we will need to bring in outside sources. I will let Assistant City Manager or Deputy City Manager Yeager, I too am terrible with titles.
all good.
Representative Acom said the same thing today about herself. But we talked about a feasibility study, what that looks like, especially within the city limits.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, you're correct. To answer your question, Councilmember Plekish, while that's been added as a strategic plan priority, there are a lot of things we would need to do in advance of starting a business if we do that. So we know that we're going to need some support to determine, is that feasible? What kind of costs would we need to consider? So that way we can make sure we bring good information to the council at a decision point for you to say, yes, we want to actually pursue this and invest resources in doing that. Or if at that point you decide that you don't want to go that route. So that's what that study would do.
Well, I see it's specially carved out from the same fund. That's why I wanted to ask what was behind it.
Yep.
Very good. All right.
Can I make one comment?
Yes, absolutely. Councilmember Parkhill.
I would just, on that same subject, I was talking to City Manager Dahl about this in our pre-discussion, and I encouraged the city to look and see where any other cities that have munis and wine and liquor stores, that maybe we can combine efforts and save some of this money, or come up with something that's not specific to Wayzata. So maybe there's a way to save some of that money.
That's a very good point, and something we can certainly consider if it makes sense to do so. Yeah, anytime we can share services and reduce some of the burdens to our citizens, that's a great idea. All right, any other questions or comments? No? I would have thought you would have been happy with the $50,000 for public art, but we picked on the $50,000 for the,
I'm not questioning that a
I
bit.
mean, okay.
Maybe we should make it 100 and take the 50,000.
No, let's not get carried away. All right. No, I think this is always an exciting time. It is, some of it's not really, sexy and shiny new object dedication of funds. These are really important transfers. This is excess money that's coming from Wayzata Wine and Spirits, so the liquor store that the city owns, Wayzata Bar and Grill. It comes, eventually, pardon me?
General fund, building, all those places as well, too.
Yep. Some of the fees that we charge for motor vehicles. So, we take that and we put that back into the community, which helps, reduce our levy. And sometimes they're for the necessities of the things that we need to do, and sometimes it's for some special projects that we want to implement that we maybe didn't have seed money to get started in, like public art. It's a priority of the council, and so this is some of that seed money to get things underway. So very exciting, and looking forward to the discussion in June where there will be more. We'll keep our fingers crossed. All right, so we'll be looking for a motion to adopt Resolution 62-2023, approving excess reserve transfers.
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councilmember Plekish. On a second?
Second.
Motion's been first and seconded. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion passes. Thank you very much. And thank you again for the clear, concise explanation for the previous item. I know that that's a tough one, but I think that's a really good policy to put forth, and as we just witnessed, it has some benefits. So absolutely fantastic. All right, we are at a new business city manager's report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just would like to thank the council, staff, and all the community members who came out for the volunteer event, the dinner that we had yesterday. Great attendance, well over 100 people. Thanks to the staff that all made it happen. It was just really nice to see all the faces in town that have given so much, not only last year, but many years prior to that as well. So great community event, and I look forward to doing it next year, and hopefully it'll be bigger and better than before. It's going to be hard to beat last night, though. And to that end, a lot of our volunteers, were from our many boards and commissions. A lot of them have served for a long time. They've given us their expertise in different fields, whether it's the HRA, Heritage Preservation Board. We've got a lot. And we're currently recruiting to fulfill vacancies for next year. So our deadline is November 28th. It's Tuesday. So I encourage anybody that's out there listening to, if you're interested, contact City Hall, contact the council. We can provide information about it and see if it's a good fit. There's a lot of talented people in this community. We'd love to talk to them, and hopefully they're interested in serving. Some committees have more of a time commitment than others, but I think we can usually find a good fit for those. So please, anybody that's watching at home or in the audience, to let us know.
We have an audience.
We do have an audience, yeah.
That's exciting.
We're happy to talk to you. A couple other quick things. The winter medallion hunt started yesterday, actually. So go to our website or check our social media. You'll get our barrage of clues. Whoever finds it will get to assist the mayor in lighting up the town for Light Up the Lake, which, by the way, is November 24th.
It's the Friday after Thanksgiving.
Yes, November 24th, Black Friday. And we're planning for that right now. It's going to be a great night. Last year's event was tremendous. We're going to do basically the same items that were just a big hit. We're going to add this year, however, a market at the depot that Joni Holst is coordinating. So we're really excited about that. We're giving out those, I don't know what they're called, those inflatable things, the police department, the Crime Prevention Coalition, they're giving out those.
Lightsabers?
Yeah.
Oh, those are so fun.
Kids love those.
And adults too, quite frankly.
And adults, yeah. So that'll be fun. The big components, of course, are the parade, the lighting. There's letters to Santa. There's the candy cane hunt. A bunch of different options for all different age groups, and it's like a Hallmark movie. It's fun, and hopefully we get some good weather. So make sure that's on your calendar for you, council, and everybody else that's watching at home.
And the highlight is the parade.
Yeah.
With all the lit fire trucks from all the surrounding communities that go down Lake Street. It's quite a hit.
It's really nice. Yeah, it's a good way to kick off the holidays.
Do we have the sleigh rides this year?
I think in the past, last year, and we intend to do it this year, where we will have the sleigh come through with the parade. So Santa, we'll have a special guest, let's just say that.
There you go. I'm looking forward to it.
And lastly, proud update of the council here. If you haven't been on Ferndale Road lately, the sidewalk is pretty close to being done. The signs are gone and everything. There's still going to be some touch-up work next spring, but it looks wonderful. We have a new sidewalk. We didn't have one there before. It's brand new. It's a really key connection between Wayzata Boulevard and Lake Street. And I would say for the most part, the tree canopy along that corridor was preserved. So I know there's a couple new trees that had to be taken out, and then we had to plant a few, but they did the best they could, and I think all in all it looks really great. And most importantly, it's just it fills a really important gap in our pedestrian system and our trails and our sidewalks. So check it out if you haven't. It's awesome.
Well, we got a compliment today during the bonding tour from one of the representatives who walks from his home into downtown Wayzata, and was complimenting us on our new sidewalk on Ferndale. So that was really nice to hear.
That was agreed. That's all I have, Madam Mayor.
Wonderful, thank you. Yes, last night was a really wonderful event. My thanks to the staff at the Wayzata Bar and Grill for their hard work in putting together our meal, and certainly for staff for all of their hard work. The room looked lovely. Certainly had a lot more ambiance than when we come in here for a meeting.
Do that
We
every
didn't
night.
have a piano player tonight when we walked in, I'm just saying, but no, it really was nice. It's so wonderful to connect with everybody who gives so much of their time and to have everybody in a room together because it's been a while since we've hosted it at that level here at, in the community room. And so it really is fantastic. And one of the things we were really, that I tried to impress on everyone is addition to filling the roles for the individual boards and commissions, we're also looking for someone to be a volunteer coordinator. And that's not for every board and commission, but it's for events like our Dig It Day and Pull It Day, and it's, bringing folks together and putting them into groups for a particular day of the year. And that role can expand as much or as little as they would like, and they would work with a member of staff here. So if anybody's interested, ladies, feel free to apply. Those are the ladies in the audience. We would love to have you and be part of the team. And it was interesting, I was speaking to a member of staff not too long ago, Nick Keyser, and it was a documentary that I was watching on healthy cities. And really, a lot of it comes from when they did their studies, volunteering and participation and walking and all of the things we're trying to implement. And it was just like, it was all about the blue zones.
Blue zones, yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, oh, wasn't that neat? We're doing that, and I didn't even know it. Encouraging the walking and the volunteerism and community, and that people do live longer, happier, healthier lives because of it. So wonderful. All right. Enough about blue zones and walking, but everybody definitely should come out for Light Up the Lake. Yeah. All right. Very good. Well, that concludes this evening's festivities. Would anyone care to make a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
And a second? Somebody? Anybody?
I'm enjoying it up here.
Second. It's been first and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, and we are adjourned.